Oh, hi there, guys. Just wanted to pick up today on what I think's been a sort of ramping up of the hysteria amongst the media and the right-wing politicians and talking heads over recent weeks. Now, it's bad in this country normally, but we seem to have reached a frenzy over recent weeks. And I think and the reason for that, I think, is that we've had three issues converging, which has left them all just frothing at the mouth, basically. Firstly, we've had, an absolute meltdown about Gaza, but not the actual genocide going on. Oh no. Instead, we've had wild criticism of the BBC platforming musicians who are critical of Israel. And that's the absolute worst for these people, because firstly, it's the BBC, the default bogeyman of any right-wing media outlet. And then secondly, it's about sweaty young people at music festivals, cultural Marxists probably, and virtue signallers who they consistently depict as a sort of fifth column in British society. And then secondly, we've had a huge uproar recently about Benefits Scroungers, disabled people and those with long-term health issues. And that was due to the government's climb down on the PIP reforms, which, I think personally is a good thing. But these nutters just want us to go much further. So we've had Kemi Badenoch delivering speeches decrying how half the population are on the sick and that people with tennis elbow are driving around in Ferraris on Motability. This rhetoric is just like Benefits Street on steroids. It's absolutely ridiculous, frankly. And then finally, we've got the ongoing small boats crisis. Now, as it's summer and we're in a long hot spell at the moment, there are endless number of boats attempting to make the crossing. So there's ample opportunity for journalists to get into a skiff and get some footage of these young men of fighting age coming here to get their free houses. But that's not the worst of it, oh no. The worst of it is that Keir Starmer has tried to resolve the issue by doing a deal with the French. I mean, bloody hell, what is this treachery? Working together with the French, absolutely ridiculous. We're supposed to be at war with them, aren't we? And then inviting Macron for a sit down with King Charles, it's just not on. So there we have it, three reasons why the right-wing media, the talking heads, the political commentators, the politicians are losing their marbles and absolutely any sense of perspective, and why they've gone crazy over recent weeks. But it's worth taking a few minutes to actually think about what's really going on here and why these media outlets, talking heads and politicians are just going so crazy at this particular moment. So firstly, we've got currently a split on the right of politics. Now, in my opinion, this means that everyone needs to outdo themselves on the cruelty front as they chase that sort of 30 to 40% of the voting public who might vote Tory or Reform, because they seem to be the only constituency that actually matter in this country. But more importantly than that, we've currently got a Labour government in charge and it's not going well. So we've had a year of difficulty, and obviously the right-wing media, the right-wing politicians and the talking heads, they can smell blood and they're on the attack. And then finally, and linked to that, this is what happens essentially when you've got an out-of-control media landscape. So it's been like this for 40 years now. So we're not, nobody's surprised, obviously. But there's a real understanding now that if enough shrieking goes on and enough howling goes on, usually they can get the change that they want. Just ask Rishi Sunak, Theresa May or Boris Johnson what happens when the media decides that you've outlived your usefulness or you're seen as a loser. Bear in mind, we've got another 4 years of this parliament, so you'd think that this level of outrage and anger would be hard to keep up, but the evidence of the last 10 years suggests otherwise, sadly. So the question is, will Starmer and Reeves be able to survive this onslaught? Personally, I very much doubt it, particularly if they have to raise taxes in the autumn and then they get pummeled in the local elections. The level of anger and vitriol in the media that we're seeing and what I've outlined here is just going to increase, I think. So whoever bottled Leveson 2 needs a good old slap, is all I can say. I mean, this country, man, Jesus. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys. Cheers. See you next time.